Welcome to the Dynasty Gambit. No, Hamid's not here. It's funny. The first name introduced when he's not here. Yeah, I'll because even when he's not here, we'll still introduce him, but he never will. But yes, unfortunately, Hamid entrusted myself with the hosting duties. Kyle Senra here. I'll get that out of the way first. Introduce my co-host, Dr. James Ferretti. What's up, Doc? I never get tired of saying that.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Thursday. No Hamid, but like you said, even if he was here, he probably wouldn't introduce himself. So he got an introduction without even being here, which is a +1.
He's always the host in our hearts. But
that's right.
Joining us on this episode of the Dynasty Gambit, a co-host of a show on the Going for Two network titled The Dynasty Pawn Shop, and I know it morphing more DFS centric in season. But Eric Romoff, Eric, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me in. My guy Clay and I are shifting gears a little bit more to the DFS world now that the season is upon us. But yeah, super excited about everything that's going on with the Going for Two network, and looking forward to a fun chat tonight.
Yeah, I mean, really, we're just a few weeks away from the season starting, and so kind of to end the off season, we're doing here top 5 rankings. And last week we did wide receivers, and we are, as the title indicates for those listening, watching, top 5 dynasty running backs. So all three of us will give our top 5. We'll kind of go one by one. In terms of numbers, everyone will give their number 1, everyone will give the number 2. But for anyone listening last week, again, Hamid and I kind of shared our top 5 wide receivers. But curious to see what Doc and what Eric, you both have to say about the number 1 dynasty wide receiver. So Eric, as the guest, we'll let you go first. Who is your dynasty wide receiver number 1?
Man, this one's super tricky. All of a sudden, youth is able to perform at this position. I feel like that's kind of like a recent development. And with that being said, I mean, I feel like it has to be Justin Jefferson. He's performing at that elite level already, and he's all the way down there at 22 years old. So he's an asset that you can get results from for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that kind of falls in line a bit with consensus right now. You see a lot of websites, rankings, ADP kind of agree with you and point to Jefferson being the dynasty wide receiver 1 right now. So, Doc, what do you have to say about your dynasty wide receiver number 1?
Yeah, so, certainly Jefferson is a great player. I was really intrigued by you and Hamid talking about your rankings last week, Kyle, and how you were kind of going back and forth with Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. I really, really, really want to put CeeDee Lamb up there at the top, but I can't do it with Tyreek Hill still being around. I realize that's kind of a boring pick, but for the explosivity that he brings and just the consistency and being attached to Patrick Mahomes, I can't put Adams above him. If I knew that Adams and Rodgers are going to be in Green Bay for the next couple of years at least, I probably would put Devontae Adams number 1. But since it looks like and you're the Green Bay Packers guy, so you tell us, but it looks like we're going to get one more year and maybe that's it. Or maybe they both relocate to somewhere else together. But just given the uncertainty around that, I kind of have to go Hill number 1.
I think it's definitely more likely that they reunite somewhere else than that they're both together on Green Bay next year. I think that would probably be my unfortunate answer as a Packers fan. Would love to see them both retire with the Packers, but I'm kind of starting. Well, I've gotten the sense, especially with Rodgers, that basically since they've drafted Jordan Love, that wasn't going to be the case. But yeah, recent signs with Adams probably point to that too, unfortunately. Hamid had Adams, and I agreed with Doc having Hill. So Eric, the guest coming in, bringing in a new flavor with Jefferson. So that's
I like
very
that,
interesting.
I like that.
I came into the offseason, I mean, coming out of last season, and Hill was right there with me. But the more I watched Jefferson's tape, and I'm struggling to recall who raised this point, but with everything that we've seen from Jefferson this year or last year, this was all with Kirk Cousins at the helm. And he's pretty well replacement level. So if you think about him as a long-term asset, there's still considerable upside. from even an incremental improvement at the quarterback position. So I'm a bit of a sucker for upside. So that's what has JJ at the top of my list.
Hey, I mean, again, he's got the youth, and even if he doesn't necessarily even ever replicate what he did last year, as long as he can consistently produce over the next decade, you'll probably be pretty happy taking him. And I think that's the case with kind of all these receivers. None of them seem like they're a poor choice. So, but we're going to get to dynasty running backs now, the main topic of today's episode. So, who are the top 5 running backs in dynasty? And Doc, do you feel like letting the guest go first again?
Of course, yeah, first? Absolutely. We're so happy to have you here, Eric. Please.
I mean, I'm Canadian, but I feel like Doc's just as polite. And actually, before we get to that, Ralph
Citarella.
Sorry, I'm Hamid's bad at saying his name. I'm just bad with names. He says, y'all better listen to Doc. The man knows his game. So
thank you, Ralph. Much appreciated. Glad to see you.
Is someone who's read your book, maybe?
He has.
It's a good book. Can't say I blame him. But yes, so Eric, we'll get to that. Top 5 dynasty running backs.
Yeah, so I mean, there's still concern around him returning from injury and what we see, but I still have to lock in CMC as the 101 in the RB ranks.
Doc, any disagreement at all there?
No, I love that, and I have less concern about him coming back, but I mean, you have to love CMC. 25 years old, first round draft capital. I mean, he's like I've heard somebody say it. I want to give him credit, but I don't remember who it was. But they're like, he's like a fantasy football cheat code. I mean, he basically is like an RB1 and a wide receiver 2, like combined together. You just can't replicate that type of productivity. And when he's on, like, he is like a workhorse, like 90% snap share plus, just amazing. So I can't knock him out of the top spot. No matter anybody else I looked at, I was like, they just don't. It's a wide gap.
No, for sure, and I agree. I think unanimous here. I even don't want to assume anything, but I'd imagine Hamid probably thinks the same. But I mean, truthfully, he had 1,000.
You don't think he put J.K. Dobbins number 1?
I know he likes Dobbins. I don't think when you can have 100 catch difference between 2 players that you'll favor one to the other. But seriously, I mean, 1,000, right? It's only happened, I think, 3 times, or only 3 players have done it, and so. Everyone wants to talk about a certain player being generational. I think we will get to that later, although he's not a running back into our roster for a bit later. But like with McCaffrey, you can really say that because really no one else has that capacity to be that much of a pass catcher as well as that much of a running threat. I think one player might come close in that he's kind of the true workhorse. He runs a ton, and he's kind of one of the top 3 targets on his team. I think that team might not pass enough ever to let that player touch what McCaffrey can do as a pass catcher. So, I have McCaffrey as my dynasty RB1 as well. So easy discussion there. I guess we're just going to keep rotating the triangle. Eric, do you want to kick us off with number 2?
So I'm going first on all of these cases.
You don't have to.
Well, yeah. Again, the guest gets their way, so it's up to you. We'll let you decide. Do you want one of us to step in?
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of rotate it around.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's really interesting what we saw with McCaffrey last year under the new coaching regime, right? There were legitimate questions if they were going to maintain that type of workload for their running back position. And now that I feel like that question is answered under rules. So no reason to expect that he is not going to lead the league in touches for the position, assuming health, right?
All right. So Doc, do you want to take it over?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fair to assume that he's going to be okay this year. Like I don't envision any of the injury, the ankle sprain, the AC joint thing. The fact that Carolina was so bad towards the end of last year, I think had a lot more to do with why he didn't play towards the end of the year. If they were fighting for a playoff spot, I think we would have seen him weeks 14, 15, 16 after the AC joint sprain. But they played it safe. They played it smart, in my opinion. And they just realized that they didn't have anything else to play for. Why get your blue chip, running back injured further for nothing, and just save him for this year. And I think that's what they did.
It did look like he healed fully from the high ankle sprain. It looked like
he did. Yeah. He
enough.
had an amazing game when he came back and then got, an unfortunate injury on top of that, but he looked like he was fully recovered from that. And, the 24, 25-year-old, 6-7 weeks, he looked like Christian McCaffrey, the one that we know and love. Just was unfortunate that he got an injury on top of that.
So Dynasty RB2.
Yeah. So for number 2, I don't know if this is how this is going to land with everybody, but I'm going to go with the quad father. I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley. Even coming off the ACL, even though the Giants' offensive line is hot trash, even though nobody knows what Danny Dimes is going to do this year, or if he's even going to be their quarterback going forward, he is just a physical freak. The fact that he can single-handedly win you a given week by himself by taking like an 80-yard screen to the house, and he can run, he can catch. He's just amazing. So given that upside, given that he's only 24 years old, I expect him to be recovered from the ACL. I don't expect that to linger. I think some of this stuff about like the springing him along slowly or whatever has been a bit overblown. I'm really not concerned about him for this year. I'm not really concerned about him going forward. Running back, football in general is a risky proposition. Running back might be the riskiest of them all. But given all that, he's my number 2.
All right. And my number 2 is a player that I've kind of been adamant in every format. I will always take this player above Barkley because I think he's just as talented. He's younger. He's not coming off the ACL tear. A much better offensive line, although dealing with an injury. And yeah, maybe I'm pushing this forward so much in there as a second-year leap, but I truly believe in the talent of Jonathan Taylor. And with the offensive line news, I had him at redraft RB3. I think I've dropped him to 5 or 6, kind of debating there with Chubb. But I think dynasty-wise, I'm no fear for me for Jonathan Taylor. So he's my dynasty RB2, and I'm going to maybe be aggressive on him and project the leap forward. And so, yeah, Eric, on to you. Who's your dynasty RB2?
Yeah, so I guess I'm the tiebreaker here, and it is a close call for me, but I'm actually edging on the side of Saquon as my number 2 overall. We've seen the physical gifts there. And very much so, like the justification for CMC, the amount of workload that he has all to himself is otherworldly. Right? I mean, he is very much so in a position where he's commanding 90% plus of the work out of that backfield. So when you have someone with that level of physical talent getting that many opportunities, he's going to convert some of those, right? He's going to break tackles. He's going to outrun people. So it is that perfect marriage of the volume floor and the scoring upside that we're all looking for in this game.
Especially a passing volume. I mean, 90 catches as a rookie or 89 catches, something like that. It was pretty ridiculous, and it's not something you see very often. So if he could ever get back to that form, he's certainly deserving. But even so, well, actually, Eric, just a quick question. You said it was really close between Barkley and someone else. Was that someone else Jonathan Taylor?
That someone else is Jonathan Taylor. Yeah.
All right.
so he's your
number 3.
Up the perfect segue to the number 3. And Kyle, I think your read is spot on, right? Like there are a lot of those physical attributes that you can make a comp to Saquon Barkley. The thing that has me sliding him to 3, like it's some sort of disrespect, is really just the sample size, right? We saw him look incredible for half a season. So once we see that full, 16, even kind of 12 game sample, I think that there are arguments to be made that he can somehow move up next year. But for now, want to see that replicated over a larger sample size with Taylor.
All right, so Doc, do you agree with Eric and have Taylor at 3, or are we going somewhere else?
We're gonna go a little bit further east for my number 3, and I love Jonathan Taylor. He's my number 4, but the guy that I put over him, we were talking about McCaffrey and how much of a workhorse he is, it's Antonio Gibson. And he is the guy who now has the coach who made Christian McCaffrey. Now that's his coach. And one thing about running backs especially is I have a bias for running backs that can catch the ball. And you know, I love multiple pathways to scoring points, when they can run, when they get touchdowns, when they can catch. That's multiple pathways where you can affect the game. Game script becomes less important. And you know, I'm not exactly like, you know, splitting the atom here, but Gibson was a wide receiver. We know he can catch the ball. He just hasn't had the opportunity to do it because he can't pass block. And the hope is that he learns how to pass block, keeps J.D. McKissick on the sidelines for some of these third downs, actually gets more involved in the passing game, and then becomes the DC version of CMC, as some people are apt to name him, and then sky's the limit. So given that upside, given the fact that he's only 23 years old, I'm going to take a shot on him upping his receiving game. And we've already seen what he can do playing essentially 0 third down snaps all last year. So if he's able to get on the field, able to get more involved in the passing game, and can replicate or exceed what he did last year as a rookie, I think sky's the limit. And it's no disrespect to Jonathan Taylor. He's my number 4. I just think his receiving game is capped a little bit, not so much because of his skill set, but because of the presence of Nyheim Hines, maybe even the presence of Marlon Mack there, as long as his Achilles holds up. And fingers crossed on that. That's where I'm at with it.
That's a pretty bold take on Gibson. You might be one of the higher ones on him, but then I'm thinking back to our fantasy draft that we're in together. You got Gibson in the second round, so you must have been super happy there. You probably looking at me. What's he doing taking Nick Chubb?
No, I knew you were going to take Nick Chubb. You love Nick Chubb, but again, it's the receiving aspect. It's like sometimes these guys get, and it's not a talent thing. It's just the game gets out of hand. You know, if the Browns, you know, have a game where they're playing and they're up like 28-0, and that could, you know, they get down 28-0, they got to throw the ball. Kareem Hunt's going to be more involved, and it's not because they're a bad team. It's not because Chubb's a bad player, but just out of bad luck, Chubb's out of the game, or he's much less utilized just because that's the way the game, you know, played out.
And like you said, Taylor has that fear with Hines. But yeah, so Gibson at 3. So we all have different number 3s. So Eric went with Jonathan Taylor, Doc with Antonio Gibson, both second-year backs. I'm going to go back to the 2017 class. And actually, it's a player I'm a little surprised that I'm the highest on this player. I figured me having him at 3 might almost be a little low. He's been an incredibly solid producer. He's one of those like true workhorses, never comes off the field. If the Vikings passed a little more overall, he'd maybe get more targets, but Dalvin Cook's workload and efficiency are so great. It seems like over the course of his career, the offensive line has also gotten better. They've certainly addressed it, infused some young talent there that's now, with, you know, after 2-3 years gotten better, gotten to be no longer rookies, but you know, just good, we'll say veteran players in the NFL. You know, weird saying veterans about 30-year guys, but that's the way it is in the NFL. And so, yeah, I still have full faith in Cook. I know there's maybe some injury concerns with him too. Again, a little bit older than guys we talk about, Barkley, Taylor, and Gibson, but the way he's been producing, I still think there's enough there to ride it out. So I'm willing to have him as my Dynasty RB3. And I might as well go again with my RB4. Doc's already hinted at it. I've hinted at it. It's Nick Chubb. I guess, Doc, your number 4 is Jonathan Taylor. So quickly, do you want to add anything about Taylor? Because I almost feel like it's the same discussion between Taylor and Chubb.
Yeah, I mean, I think Taylor's great. I actually want to add something on Dalvin Cook.
Sure, feel free.
So Dalvin Cook, for full disclosure, he did not make my top 5 at all. He's completely off the list. He's in the top 10, but he's not in the top 5. And I realize that might be like a contrarian take or whatever, but I want to back that up. And I think he is a phenomenal talent. I think that he does it all, like you said. The age is a little bit of a thing. The injuries are more of a thing for me. He had an early ACL tear. He's had a litany of soft tissue injuries. He's had issues with both of his shoulders. He had over 350 touches last year as, you know, a 25, 26-year-old. And I think that there's certainly a universe where he continues on for 2 or 3 or 4 more years and is very productive. However, the cautionary tale to Dalvin Cook is Todd Gurley. Dalvin Cook's 26. Todd Gurley's 27. So what I'm saying is sometimes with these guys, the cliff comes quick. And I don't want to be looking for a chair to sit in when the music stops with Dalvin Cook. So for redraft, I don't really have a problem taking him, very high. He's going basically 2nd overall, 3rd overall. I have no issue with that. But for Dynasty, where I'm making that type of investment, and you have to make a substantial investment to get him. I think he was a first round startup pick for us, right, Kyle?
Yes, I believe he went off the board before either of us had our first pick, so there was never even any of that temptation.
Right. So we never even got a shot.
I think he might have gone 5th or 6th.
Yeah. So for a first round startup pick, I gotta pump the brakes on that a little bit. I mean, that's a huge investment to make where you could potentially get left with empty pockets a year or 2 from now at best in some cases. So that's just where I'm at with that. And it's not an indictment of his talent or his ability, but that's where I'm at with it.
And full disclosure, that is super flex. I think in a single quarterback, right, if he goes 6, I got no problem with that. That's good value.
No,
but
for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I was definitely happy that you got Lamar Jackson 108. I'm sure you didn't expect that at all, right, Doc?
I did not.
And I was pretty happy that Dak Prescott got to a spot that from the 112 I could trade up to the 109 to get. So I think we were happy to see Cook go, but obviously the person drafting him was as well.
Hey, and they can get the last laugh too. I mean, he could do what he did last year and then some. He could stay healthy for all 16 games and outproduce what he did last year. I'm just not banking on that.
So before I get to talk about Nick Chubb, good transition here. Question from a listener, Fendi. I'm gonna defend my lack of knowing the name and to say I'm just really bad at it and read the other names for a PPR league. Travis Etienne or Kareem Hunt. Now, I'm gonna assume this is redraft because I got a feeling if this is Dynasty, I would guess we're all pretty heavy on Etienne, right? Just so much younger, and we expect they're probably both going to be just pass catching backs that we hope get some carries, goal line. You'd rather get the guy that's a first round pick on the team he's on now and just entering a rookie. So I think if it's Dynasty, I think it's Etienne, no problem. But redraft, as I suspected, redraft question here. That's tough actually, and I know their ADP is pretty similar. I was just doing a podcast yesterday. I was on the Fantasy Coaches Podathon, and that the topic of Kareem Hunt, or specifically the topic of James Robinson, Travis Etienne came up because all three of them are going in the same range. The two Jags running backs and Kareem Hunt, they're kind of going 4th, 5th round. My thing is almost I kind of like the receivers in that range, is why I'd maybe fade receiver early and go running backs, tight ends for the first 3 rounds and want to hit wide receiver in round 4, not have to make this decision. I think for redraft, I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt. I like that offense better. And even though he's the pass catching back, the Browns also showed last year, even when Nick Chubb was in the game, Kareem Hunt would still get some goal line carries. So he still has touchdown upside and kind of standalone value, whereas not really sure how the Jags are yet. And maybe this is me going, okay, 4th round, I still want a secure, safe asset. Kareem Hunt has provided that. So I would go with Hunt over either the Jags backed. I'm pretty sure that's what I also said on the Fantasy Coaches Pod, so I'm being consistent for everyone. But yeah, Kareem Hunt is my answer there. Doc, how about you?
Well, what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, so I'm siding with Kyle here. It's super close as their ADP would reflect. I think they're 24 and 25 coming off the board one after the other. And for me specifically in the redraft world, a little bit to the point that I raised with Taylor, it's more about known quantities, right? Like we know who Kareem Hunt is and what his role is in the offense. To sort of double down on your point, Kyle, not only was he getting goal line work, he was almost their de facto red zone back. So while his volume is capped due to the presence of Nick Chubb, his upside is still very real. So I'm kind of in a similar boat where I'm not really getting a lot of either of these players based on where they're being drafted. But if I'm looking for a running back in this territory, I want the known quantity, and that's Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally agree. And I think it's unanimous. But to even add on to that, I think Kareem Hunt has a high floor As you said, Eric, we know what we're going to get from him. We know he's going to catch the ball. The Browns offense looks like it's on the upswing. He's going to get some goal line carries. And here's the caveat. If Nick Chubb misses any games, he's a plug-and-play RB1. No questions asked. Like, for whatever happens, he pulls a hamstring, slips getting out of the shower, gets struck by lightning, whatever. Like, if he's not playing, like, Kareem Hunt is a locked and loaded RB1. We can't say that with Travis Etienne, regardless if something happens to James Robinson or whatever. We don't know what he is. Like, he's got all the potential in the world. Phenomenal player, super talented. We don't know about Urban Meyer. I mean, can we trust the guy that cut Tim Tebow? I don't know. I don't think we can. I'm just kidding. But that might be his least like
questionable decision,
indiscretion all year. Like, who knows what he's going to do with this offense? Who knows how James Robinson is going to be involved? Who knows how Etienne is going to be involved? Who knows how Trevor Lawrence is going to make all this, work together? There's so many questions there for redraft. I'm kind of out on Etienne. Where he's going.
And I think that's kind of the thing, right? Like, we have so many questions around Etienne. He's looked good in camp this offseason, right? But he's also looked to be more involved as a slot receiver than as a running back, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're putting it in a different light, are you looking to capture a part-time slot receiver in the 4th, 5th round turn? Probably not, right?
Right.
There's just so many things that we have to make assumptions on in order to pull the trigger on ETN, and that's introducing a lot of risk to your build.
Yeah, now, I think we've made the case like Kareem Hunt is the safe option. If you're a risky gambler, I do think Travis Etienne probably has the highest ceiling. Like, he could become a full workhorse that isn't dependent on the other running back being out. Maybe he completely overtakes James Robinson this year. And so it's about risk tolerance. If you want to play it safe in the 4th round, I think Kareem Hunt's the better option. If you're looking for ceiling, that might lie with Etienne. But like Doc said, there is a path where Hunt has that ceiling as well, but I think it might arguably be a bigger ceiling with Etienne.
Yeah. So, think about what you're passing, though, in the 4th round. Like that, listen, I'm all for swinging for the fences, but swing for the fences in the double-digit rounds, Like, when you're in the 4th round and you got to pass up other guys that are kind of either known commodities or, have, RB1 or wide receiver 1 potential, like, that's a big swing to take. Like, yeah, it could hit, but I mean, you could also sink your draft in the 4th round because the guy ends up getting 600 yards and, is relegated to water boy duty because he fumbles on his first carry or something like that. I mean, that's a non-zero chance that happens too. Like, he's still a rookie.
We don't know how Urban Meyer coaches. Like, not even just personnel decision, but like, does he pull guys early from games in the NFL? Like, we don't know that. So there is a lot of unknowns. But like,
based on the Oklahoma drills that he's been fined for, it seems like he might be a bit of a caveman on the sidelines, right? So anything's possible.
Anyway. We'll get back to our discussion, our top 5 running back discussion. And I've already kind of hinted at it. And again, transitioning from Hunt to stay with the Cleveland Browns, my number 4 is Nick Chubb. I'll keep it quick. It's a pretty similar argument to why I have Jonathan Taylor so high. Incredibly talented running back on an efficient offense behind a great offensive line. There's maybe a lack of pass catching there. I think the reason I have Taylor ahead is a little younger than Chubb, but also I think we've seen Nyheim Hines take some goal line carries, but I think we can all agree Hunt's a more talented running back than Nyheim Hines. So I think we're more worried about that overall. That being said, I think they were both top 12 running backs last year. And I mean, Chubb, like he didn't really catch that many passes, certainly not compared to the year before, where at least then he caught, I believe, 36. So if he can get something close to 40, that maintains that. I think he'll for sure be a top 12. I think Chubb and Taylor, it's very unlikely they'll be the RB1 this year, but I think that they might have really safe chances, a lot more than most backs, to be top 5. So I think that's kind of where, again, being safe early. And as I mentioned in this Dynasty startup we're doing with we have Hamid in this league as well, and Gersten as well, a usual guest or a typical guest on the show. And so in that league, I ended up with Chubb as my RB1, going Dak Prescott, Nick Chubb to start, and Doc, you've had a similar build, Lamar Jackson, Antonio Gibson to start. So interesting to see how our teams evolve through that. But yeah, I definitely put my money where my mouth is with Chubb. And there were a lot of young guys that I passed up to take him. So yeah, I've got him at RB4, and I'm not. It's funny. This is my first Dynasty share. As much as I've had him priced up, I found I just haven't been able to get him. Either going heavy for quarterbacks or go in with an early tight end instead. But this draft, I decided I wanted to build a solid RB core. I'm French. I want to pronounce every letter, but hopefully it's a good looking core, not a corpse of. I know DeAndre Swift's already hurt, but yeah, Nick Chubb is Dynasty RB4 for me. So Erica, who's your number 4? We got Doc said Taylor, I said Chubb.
Yeah, so for me it's Dal Cook, and in my mind, based on the on-field productivity that we've seen out of him since he came in the league in 2017. Sliding him down to 4 is accounting for those health questions, right? Specifically in the dynasty game, I feel like you have really about a 4 or 5 season window of productivity from the running back position, and that window is likely shortened for Dalvin Cook. So I don't really like having him at 4, but you can't argue with the on-field production. I would feel very much so like I'm holding what is soon to be a depreciating asset. So I would probably try to get as much as I could out of him on the field this year, and really look to sell him off to someone making a championship run this year if it's not my team. So as we kind of round out the top 5 for me, I think this is really where kind of the texture and makeup of your team is weighing in a little bit more. But Dow's just been absolutely phenomenal on the field. Just those soft tissue injuries, right? They tend to linger, and I think it's going to shorten his window. So that's what has him slide into 4 for me.
Okay.
So Doc, you said you don't have Cook inside your top 5.
No.
You've revealed your top 4. So who is number 5? Is it a surprising name, or is it maybe I don't know? Maybe there's a name that we haven't mentioned yet that people are expecting us to name. So who do you have, Doc?
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be surprised by this, but I kind of struggled with 2, and I ended up at 5 here, and I have an honorable mention. So I'll just give you number 5. It's Najee Harris for Pittsburgh. And, it's even though he's a rookie, I just was looking at the other guys, and it was like Alvin Kamara questions with quarterback and the offense now that Drew Brees is retired. DeAndre Swift, is he going to get the role that everybody thinks he's going to? I don't know. J.K. Dobbins, can he catch the ball? I don't know. But the one thing that I think we can say with confidence is they're at least going to give this guy a shot, even behind the papier-mâché offensive line that he has, to be the bell cow back. And, he's really productive in that role in Alabama. So I'm willing to – it's close. All these guys are close. They're all valid arguments. But I had to pick somebody at number 5, which is one of the things where we've talked about it before, like rankings versus tiers. Like – the other 4 guys are in it, they're much higher up in a tier, and then we have a tier break. But when you actually put numbers on it, then it's like we've had these arguments like, oh, you got this guy at 21, I got him at 23. Like it's like okay, but they're separated by 5 projected points for the whole year.
I'll be honest, I kind of feel like the tier break is almost after McCaffrey. Does anyone else?
Oh, for sure. No, there is a tier break after McCaffrey. Then there's another tier, and then there's another tier.
Okay. I think in redraft, I might consider Cook in that same tier as McCaffrey, but I think for Dynasty, I think it's McCaffrey alone.
Yeah, for sure. So that's it. They're going to hand him the reins to the offense and see what he can do. So I'm willing to buy in on that.
All right, so the rookie Najee Harris is RB5, and I thought I was being aggressive. I think I've got him at maybe RB10, RB9, and I know. So, yeah. Well, and he went early in our draft as well, Doc. Gladys, who is a Steelers fan, and will be, I think we're both looking forward to host in season with her on Monday nights. She 100%. Took him right before I took Chubb, and which is right before you took Gibson at 203. So, kind of interesting that you may not be the only one who's really high on Harris. Although she did start with 2 rookies, so that might also have been a rookie inclined strategy, get the young players in Dynasty. But Eric, who do you have as your Dynasty RB5?
Yeah, so I thought I had a controversial pick with this, but my RB5 is Antonio Gibson. And we talked about him when we were up at 3 a few minutes ago. but to have a player of his caliber make the transition over to a new position and have CMC's former coach make the Christian McCaffrey comp himself. I mean, there are plenty of reasons to be excited. We saw him absolutely flash on field last year, and that was with losing almost all of the third down work, right? I think it was 9-1 that McKissick outtouched him on third downs.
Yeah.
So he has the ability to command that early down work as a sophomore this year, and the upside for this year and years to come to really get more involved as a pass catcher, which is more in line with his natural skill set. So the upside there is just incredible. You know, kind of peeling back a layer or two more, I think Ron Rivera is going to be in Washington for the foreseeable future. So the utilization of that CMC light type of back is something that is a very real possibility for him for the next 2, 3, maybe more seasons. So he's an asset that I'm absolutely bullish on in the dynasty game. I thought I was going to be making the hot take, putting him at 5, but you know, Doc agrees with a lot of my points and then some.
Well, apparently the hot take on this show is me not having him. I don't even think I have Gibson in my top 12. I think he's at 13. I think he's right outside that 12. I mean, I still have him as, I mean, there's still, I guess, 4 other guys from that class last year that I still prefer over Gibson. So maybe I'm just not a believer yet. I'm really close to talking about one of them here. It's funny. If you had asked this a month ago, I would have been talking about another one of those guys that would have, you know, that's kind of leapfrogged him the other way. I had Cam Akers at RB5.
Yeah.
But I mean, Achilles tear, that drops him dramatically. I think we talked about on this show, especially how much I was dropping him completely. And I was pretty fortunate that one share I was able to get a first for. You know, someone was looking at my rankings. They'd say, you don't think he's worth a first. But luckily someone else did. But yeah, it's not Cam Akers. I almost put DeAndre Swift. I guess I'll say that as my honorable mention, but it's weird. I didn't think I'd be the only one talking about this player in my top 5, but I know there's concerns at quarterback, but I got to say, maybe it's part of my anti-Drew Brees talk where I don't really think Drew Brees has been that great over the last few years. So, I mean, if Kamara's done this with a kind of a lesser form Drew Brees, I think he can manage with, I mean, I guess it is pretty awful quarterback play he might get from Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, but I mean, I think he's going to see a ton of targets. It's the same thing with Swift. I mean, there's very little competition. TJ Hawkinson's probably the only more talented player, just as talented player as Swift on that Lions team.
Well, you're not a Quintez Cephas truther?
No. I think I believe more in the rookie they took this year than the rookie they took last year.
Amon Ross, same round. Twitter.
If anything, I'd like to see Brashad Perryman legit get a chance to be a number 1 wide receiver. And I mean, this might be it. Like this is it. Like this, go take those reins.
This is his chance.
But like even with that, I don't see how Swift doesn't get a ton of targets. But conversely, I don't see how Kamara doesn't get a ton of targets. It's probably still a better offense with the Saints. I mean, the Lions' offensive line is actually pretty decent, so I don't think it's that far off. So, like, I'm flip-flopping really between Kamara and Swift 5 and 6. And part of the reason I'm really tempted to put Swift is just because the age, right? I mean, I guess there is only a 4-year difference, but that's, like Eric said, that's sometimes a whole running back window, right? From the 2017 class to 2020. So I'm almost talking myself into Swift. I think the fact that he's dealing with an injury right now maybe is leaving me a little, less aggressive on him. But I mean, I was fortunate enough to get him as well in our Dynasty Draft doc, and I thought I was pretty surprised. Where did I get him? I think end of the third. Yeah, and I think you were. Yeah, we both were thinking that too. Heavy running backs, and I remember you were pretty happy. Elliott and Eckler right around that range. I got Swift and Dobbins. So you went with the older guys. I went with the older for running backs.
I'm an older guy, and you're a younger guy, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess we'll say
it's
the second year contract.
Your rankings are kind of inverse here. Seems like Doc is putting the premium on youth.
Yeah. So anyway, Kamara, Swift at 5. I can't really decide between them honestly. But Eric, did you say your 5? Sorry, I'm having a hard time keeping track.
Antonio Gibson was my 5.
Yeah.
And for whatever it's worth, Alvin Kamara is my 6.
Okay.
I mean, he's absolutely electric on the field. That Saints offensive line is as steady as it gets. You know, it's rarely the elite unit in the league, but it produces it creates the lanes that he needs. to your point about the quarterback play, the thing that had him outside of my top 5 landing at the 6th spot was less to do with the question marks around the quarterback play, right? The way that Drew Brees utilized Kamara in that offense, I think, is fairly readily replicated, right? I feel like Taysom can do something similar, and same thing with Jameis. More so it's a system and scheme thing for me. Sean Payton is going to give another running back, 31-year-old Latavius Murray, or running back to be named later, 150, 170 carries every year. And to my point about Ron Rivera, Sean Payton's staying in New Orleans for however long he wants to. So I think that there is going to be that cap on the workload for Kamara for as long as he and Payton are there, which is probably going to overlap perfectly. And that's what had him down to 6 in my ranks.
Interesting.
So, Doc, who's your honorable mention that you wanted to talk about?
All the guys that you mentioned are in my top 10. This guy who is my honorable mention, who I was really kind of debating on, does he slide into 5? And I couldn't do it at the end, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And, he's only 22 years old. Let's be honest with, we could be honest, it's a safe space. We probably expected too much of the kid last year. I know he burnt a lot of people, but it's like they kind of set him up to fail. Projecting him as a middle of the first round pick last year in the middle of COVID. He's still only 22 years old, super talented kid. All prospect progression is not linear. And everybody is just kind of like, he was inefficient. He had the first game where he had a bunch of goal line carries and he didn't get any touchdowns. And then everybody was like, okay, this guy sucks. He's not going to get any touchdowns ever again. They brought in a veteran because they weren't convinced that he was going to be able to convert for that year. Like, they're trying to win the Super Bowl. But that doesn't mean that he's never going to be able to do it. People learn, people grow. Think about like your first year in high school or college. Like, you got to learn new things. You got to learn a new playbook. You got to learn a new system. Like, when you go to school, you got to figure out where the bathroom is. Where's the classroom? Am I in building A or in building B? That's all takes resources. You got to figure out your way around town. Like, now all that stuff's off the table. So he has the opportunity at least to exceed what he did last year. The reason I didn't ultimately make him number 5 is because there is a possibility that this is who he is. Like, what we saw last year is what he is. There is no more. This is what he is. But there is the potential that there's more. So because of those reasons, and because he's really alone in the backfield now for the most part, I know Darrell Williams is still there, but the ghost of Le'Veon Bell is no longer looking over his shoulder. So,
but the ghost of Jerick McKinnon's there.
Yeah, the ghost of Jerick McKinnon is there. But when you talk about injuries with Dalvin Cook, it's like, Joe, we've been waiting for Jerick McKinnon to get off IR for like 3 years now, it seems. So when he gets in and starts taking meaningful carries away from somebody, I will believe that when I see it. Jerick, if you're watching, we wish you the best, but I'm not banking on you being productive. I mean, if I have to.
It seems like he only ever got carries with the 49ers last year when they were like down to him and Hasty, right? There was a couple games where those were the only two, and that seems like that's when mostly he produced. And I think Hasty overtook him pretty quickly.
Little window where he was literally the last man standing. But that took 2 years. Took 2 years for him to get to that point. So,
and I mean, for those hoping for us to get to our roster like we do episodes, that probably took 2 years to get through those top 5 RBs. But so the quick recap was we all had McCaffrey at 1, and then it's a big mishmash. You see a lot of Barkley. Actually, it's funny. I didn't have Barkley at all in my top 5, and you both had him at 2. So that's I know I'm pretty low on Barkley. I kind of feel like I'm kind of fading him. So that's just my
it's
call
kind of
there.
Amazing because you and Hamid are the ageists of the panel. So the fact that you got Gibson outside the top 12 and you got Saquon out of the top 5, like that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It is kind of a mishmash. But anyway, so getting to the roster now. And I know we don't usually do this. I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try and share the screen of the roster.
Ooh.
We'll do it live.
Yeah, we'll see how this works.
We'll do it live.
Okay, there we go. So I don't know if everyone can tell. Does it appear on the screen?
Yes. Well,
we got it.
I can see it.
All right, so we'll stick here for now. So this is so Doc. Actually, you're more involved in this. So actually, if you like, you can explain this if you want. If not, I can take it.
Yeah, for sure. So it's 12-team league, single quarterback, no tight end premium, PPR, and standard dynasty stuff. And the only thing that's interesting about it is that it's start one running back, start three wide receivers, two flex spots. So you only have to start one running back, and then tight end, kicker, defense. And that's basically the only wrinkle there. So it kind of takes some of the pressure off the running back position where you're not forced to start two. You can go one running back, 5 wide if you wanted to.
Yeah, conversely, you could go 3 running backs. Well, I guess
Right.
3 running backs, 2 wide receiver. Or no, so I guess three
running backs, 3 wide receivers. Yeah. So you got
at most it'll but most will always be even. But yeah, okay. So interesting. And I guess the first thing, we'll start with the quarterback position. But the first thing is single quarterback. You got Kyler Murray, Trey Lance, and Carson Wentz. I'll be honest, in single quarterback, especially with Murray and Lance, if the plan was to just stick with the 2, I almost think Carson Wentz is droppable in the format. I don't know if that's too, if I'm being too harsh on Wentz, but I guess you have Kyler Murray's got a week 12 bye. I think the assumption here is you're playing Kyler Murray every week. I don't know that you'd ever throw in the rookie Lance anyway. I guess that the hope is if Lance isn't starting by week 12, you've got Wentz, who's hopefully back from injury by week 12. But still, I think that it's risk that in a single quarterback, it would depend, of course, on how many quarterbacks are available. If everyone does collect them and hoard them, and maybe all the starters should be rostered anyway. So that depends. But I'm not afraid to cut Carson Wentz if it means getting depth at other positions. But I also don't know that you necessarily need depth at a ton of positions anyway. So am I being too harsh on Carson Wentz?
I don't know, Eric. What do you think? I think you're on mute, Eric. Do we lose Eric? Do we lose me? Oh, okay.
So I think it really boils down to the makeup of the league, to Kyle's point, right? In single quarterback, there is really no value in holding Wentz, in my opinion, unless there is some downstream maneuvering to where you think you can package him in a deal or get some return for him. But he is quite literally never breaking your starting lineup. By the time that he's returning from injury, there's a very real chance that Trey Lance has taken the job in San Francisco. So yeah, it's definitely. It's a strong quarterback room. Don't get me wrong, but given the format, I would rather take that roster spot and do something else with it if I don't believe that I can get something in return. Which is the beauty of the dynasty game, right? You can probably get something, even if it's nominal, as opposed to just cutting him outright.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you guys is Wentz is on the chopping block for sure. Like
I think the
if not an outright cut.
Yeah, I think the one scenario where you would actually want to hang on to Wentz is if you decide to make him your backup and you're actually going to trade Trey Lance, especially once he starts games. His value might be super high, and someone might be willing to make him their starter and willing to give up maybe even a starter at another position back, a good piece or at least a good draft pick. So if that was the angle to try and shop Lance, then I would hang on to Wentz, thinking that he is going to be the long-term backup or at least a placeholder for the long-term backup, and that's kind of a long-term rotating, right? Because again, if the plan is to hang on to Murray, because I mean the other option is maybe Kyler Murray's the sell. Maybe Kyler Murray, who's considered a top 3, top 4 dynasty QB right now. Is there a way to get back in that tier? I feel like I've talked about that top 6, top 7 tier in dynasty before, and really wanting to be within that top 11, top 12 anyway. So maybe is that a trade that happens where you could trade back from Murray to get one of those other guys that's maybe considered maybe another rookie like Fields or Lawrence, right? And you get more added on to them, give up Murray. That's an option too. So really, I think all 3 quarterbacks are to shop for sale, and you can kind of build your team however you want. You might not want to give up Murray, right? And say Murray is the guy I'm building around. Lance makes sense to move. If you want to sell Murray at the absolute high price, you kind of try and build it around Lance, Wentz. a little risky for week one, but you might be able to patch something together. So I think there are definitely options there. With it, but I think I would want to make a move. I don't want to have this 3 quarterback room because I think it's too good for this format. I think like Eric was referring to, right? In single quarterback, it's probably too much value being left on your bench at this position. So find a way to make a move, I think, is how I would go about it.
Okay.
Kyle, I'm right there. I'm right there with you. I don't want to zoom out too much on the entirety of the roster, but looking at the remaining spots that are rostered here, I think it's 22 in total. A lot of work that needs to happen on this roster.
Yeah,
right?
that's where it gets interesting.
Is certainly the most win now of assets that you have in this quarterback room, although he's still very young himself. So I tend to look at it through a similar lens as Kyle, right? Maybe you want to sit on Murray for a few weeks and just kind of get a better read on Wentz's return or Lance's trajectory. But ultimately, you can plug a lot of gaps in this roster by moving on from Kyler Murray.
And it doesn't seem like that's something you have to do before the season. To your credit there, Eric. Like people will still probably be willing to pay the price, maybe even more so in season if someone gets an injury at quarterback and they want that elite option. Then it might be the time to strike. So you're kind of waiting and seeing. And I mean, in the meantime, you can plug them in your lineup and get the points. So it's one of those where if the opportunity, the price isn't right away, someone might pay a better price later in the season too.
Yeah, you mentioned injury. I love to strike on the other side of that coin. When you're in a dynasty league with someone who somewhat unexpectedly has a contending team, right? A couple of their bench assets really hit, and all they're waking up to realize I'm a piece or two away. You can absolutely maximize your return on that situation. Where it's like, man, if I could just get the rushing floor and upside of Kyler Murray onto this suddenly viable team, I'm right in the mix. So
that's true too.
That mid-season trade, I think, potentially brings a lot of value to the overall roster.
So there's a trade to be made with this quarterback room, but it's just finding the right one. I mean, again, I doubt Wentz is worth anything in a trade, so it's really between Murray and Lance where that trade is happening.
Yeah.
So looking at the running back position, again, only start one. But like, who is the starter here? I mean, I think there's 2 obvious candidates for this season. You got Myles Gaskin, Darrell Henderson. But after that, you've got guys in committees, guys that are backups. Just running through quick: Devontae Booker from the Giants, Tevin Coleman from the Jets. Love to the New York guys. Leonard Fournette, Kenneth Gainwell, Elijah Mitchell, Jamal Williams. The good news about it is that there's quite a few young players. Like, there's a couple older guys like Coleman, and it seems like Fournette's been in the league forever. But actually, I'm pretty sure Booker's been in the league longer than Fournette. But like, Fournette gets the perception of being old. So, but yeah, I think it's because you only have to start one running back. I think between Gaskin and Henderson, if you play the matchups right, you have that one starter kind of per week, but I think where I'm worried about this running back room is next year. I mean, do the Dolphins replace Gaskin with a higher price guy, or does I mean, this could be the make or break year for Gaskin, especially. He could be established himself firmly as the guy there, and they want to ride out his rookie contract and not bring in much competition. But I think it's pretty risky to just rely on that. But at least there's I don't think you desperately have to go buy points at the running back position to compete. You've kind of got that between Gaskin and Henderson, but it's really looking the long-term future at running back. Gainwell, Mitchell, probably that. And then, maybe so what this team needs is probably more youth in the same vein as Gainwell and Mitchell, perhaps. Cheap options that kind of accumulate.
Yeah, and even though it's just looking at it, I mean, I have Henderson above Gaskin at this point, and that is more luck than anything else because Henderson was on the roster, and then then Cam Akers got hurt, so prior to that it was looking a lot worse. But given that situation, I think that's totally valid. The only thing for me with running backs is, I think we like to play this projection game where we're thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And it's just such a dangerous position. It's so risky that sometimes not infrequently, we just never get there. And Cam Akers is a great example of that. This year, I mean, there was a lot of people a month ago who thought they were in really good shape, maybe made big time trades for Cam Akers or whatever. And then the next thing you know, it's like he didn't even get hurt in a game. He got hurt in practice. Like, practice as a running back is dangerous.
I don't even think it was practice. I thought he was away from the team. I thought he was biking or something. Wow.
Yeah, I thought I could be mistaken. I thought it wasn't practice, but I could be mistaken.
Because I think this happened before training camp, right? This was kind of after the OTAs, but before training camp, kind of the awkward phase where there's nothing going on. Like, I really thought that like this was just complete freak accident away from it. Like, again, I thought I read he was biking and it happened.
I didn't know that. I thought when I read it initially, whoever sent it, they said it happened in practice, but I could be wrong. Either way, it's like everything is dangerous, right? But that idea of like.
I'm gonna hire doctors, right?
I'm gonna have this guy for the next 7 years because he's 22. It's like, again, I go back to Todd Gurley. Like, Todd Gurley in 2017, 2018 was an absolute demigod, and now, I mean, he's out of a job. He's 27. Like, you might not get there. So, like, I get the idea of like you want to have security now, you want to have security later, you want to have everything kind of work in a linear progression over time. And I think if there is an area, and again, my own personal bias, but if there's an area where I'm going to go away from that, it's going to be at the running back position just because of the instability and the volatility of it. Going
that purely for points, so not being afraid to maybe make that Murray trade for a win now running back.
Yeah, right. And with the expectation that he could tear his Achilles riding on a mountain bike or whatever Cam Akers was doing. Like, there's no guarantees. Like, with running back, there's no guarantees with anything, but with running back, there's especially no guarantees. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. It's on a year-to-year basis. Even though it's dynasty, it's still on a year-to-year basis for me because the stories change, coaches change, narratives change, and then you end up chasing your tail. You're chasing the dragon. It's like, oh, I had this guy ranked high and now he's low, so I want to get rid of him and I want to get this other guy who's ranked high, and then next year he's low, and then it's like you end up it's like the stock market. It's like you're buying high and selling low if you're not careful. So that's just kind of the way that I look at
it. So Eric, what do you think about this running back room?
Yeah, I look at it through a similar lens as Doc, right? The format itself really lends itself to a lot of creativity in how you think about the position. You definitely did catch lightning in the bottle with the Cam Akers injury. Speedy recovery to him, but we are here now, and now you have two very viable starters in a format where you only need one. Given the depth of this roster, how many spots you have physically, and the requirement to only start one running back, I'm looking at it through the exact same lens. I'm trying to stack up as many low cost, high upside assets on my running back bench as possible, right? Devontae Booker might get you something. Tevin Coleman maybe will start this year. We know who Leonard Fournette is, right? Like, I'm really looking to churn out these older kind of second and third string running backs and just get as many lottery tickets as I can from this year and last year's draft, right? Because if any of them emerge, you now have the requisite points from this position, especially given that you only need to start one, to where you can very much so be a contender. And the investment you need to make to get those guys is nominal, right? So you're definitely in a good position from a starting standpoint this year, but I would really be prioritizing as much youth as possible in my running back room, just given how deep these benches are in this format.
So would Coleman be considered a cut for you?
I mean, it's so hard to do all of this in a vacuum, right?
Yeah. You have to know who's on the waiver wire and
exactly.
Specific players to pick them up for. I mean, if there were young running backs,
it's pretty ugly. I mean, I can tell you that. I mean, the thing is, you're not, not to put you on the spot, Eric. Like, he's definitely on the chop. Like you said, Wentz is on the chopping block. I think it's fair to say Coleman is the guy on the chopping block. And the only reason that I would even consider keeping him on the roster is because we just don't know what the Jets are going to do. Like, Coleman does have a relationship with some members of that coaching staff. They brought him in for a reason, even though they took Michael Carter. We just don't know how involved he's going to be. I assume if he is involved, it's not going to be for very long. But, there is a possibility that, just like you said, like somebody could get hurt. You could end up with a couple of weeks of value out of him. He's got his own injury issues, so it's not like he's going to win you the league, but he might be able to plug a hole for you if you're on a bye week or a couple other guys get hurt. And if not, he's probably going to go.
And to be fair, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
No, please.
Just with Coleman, one of the things that the 49ers, and which a lot of that staff is now on the Jets, is they tend to use him a lot at the goal line. Like he and Jeff Wilson seems like got most of the goal line carries over the last 2 seasons. Like they really concentrated on those two as their when it's not Kyle Juszczyk, of course. There is some other trickery around the goal line, but for those goal line backs, seems like that might be a role he may get with the Jets again. So he's got weekly touchdown upside. Problem then is it's tough to know when to play him. When's he going to score? So
right.
But we could move on to the. Sorry,
the way that I always look at these decisions. Booker is free to cut in my mind. In terms of Coleman, I always ask myself how likely and or how quickly that person is going to get picked up if I cut them, and I think he would be scooped up pretty quickly. I think he's more of a hold because there are those question marks around how the Jets are going to utilize him, but also because at least indicators are he's likely to be decently involved to start the season. And so there are a number of running backs, specifically from this year's rookie class, who are going to take a little bit of time to emerge, right? We talked about ETN earlier, Williams in Denver. There are very likely managers, teams in your league who are trying to fill a 1 to 3 week gap. So if, we get out of week 1 and Coleman got 65% of the touches, all of a sudden he's a very, very viable and valuable asset for those teams that are trying to buy a little bit of near-term time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you can get a pick out of any player that you were considering cutting, I guess that's a bonus.
Right.
Yeah. Good point, Eric. So we're going to move over to the wide receivers now. And because of the league format, having to start 3 minimum, it's the only position that requires multiple starters. I kind of get the sense it's probably the most important position to have, which is unusual for me because usually I'm the fade wide receiver guy. But this is where kind of I think the success or failure of this team really hinges on this wide receiver room. A few nice pieces, like productive win now pieces in Keenan Allen and Mike Evans. Some maybe support, maybe Cortland Sutton, depends on what cut you expect from his recovery. A couple support guys like Russell Gage, DeMarcus Robinson, Tim Patrick, and a couple of rookies, Diami Brown, Josh Palmer. So there's a bit of a balance. I think, this team does have a few rookies on it throughout it. So there is some balance in terms of the age. But personally, I feel like this wide receiver room isn't deep enough at the high end. I mean, there's lots of names here, but I feel like really after Allen and Evans, there's a lot of question marks, even with Cortland Sutton, like how he's going to recover the quarterback situation there. So trying to find that third solid starter, I think I'd rather have Sutton as a flex option, and I'd rather have a better wide receiver 3, I think is one thing I would do. So maybe that's what Kyler Murray gets you is that elite wide receiver. But that's kind of how I feel. Eric, do you want to talk about the wide receiver room at all?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll double down on that point. Given what we just reviewed with the running back room, you're likely to be starting 4 or 5 receivers every single week, right? So not just kind of counting down to get to 3. When you try to expand that out to get to 5 starters, it gets wobbly, right? Some of that is circumstance. I am a Cortland Sutton believer. I think that he's going to contribute in a meaningful way. But as you kind of roll that forward to who's 4 and who's 5, you're potentially considering, his alternative or his running mate in Tim Patrick. And that's not necessarily a quarterback situation that I want to be that heavily invested in. So, really, I like this group of receivers on the whole, but given that you're going to depend on, 5-6 of your starting lineup, your starting kind of flex spots out of this room, definitely needs to get a bit of an overhaul, even if it's, somewhat lateral moves, right? moving off of Tim Patrick to a comparable player in a different situation. So those are the things that come to mind for me. I'm a huge Daimi Brown stan, so I definitely love seeing him sitting there as one of the two rookies on the team. Josh Palmer certainly has a good amount of upside, with really the sky being the limit for Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense. But to Kyle's point, I would really look to almost kind of invert the depth or the number of roster positions I spend on this wide receiver core in particular.
Maybe, yeah, if you're able to sell off Coleman for a pick and open a roster spot, you pick up a receiver instead of a running back.
Yeah, for makes total sense.
Okay. And Doc, did you want to say anything about the wide receiver room or talk about the tight ends?
The only thing is that I think maybe I'm higher on Russell Gage than a lot of other people. And maybe that's even a hedge, as we get to Kyle Pitts. Like, if Kyle Pitts isn't a thing, that kind of ups the chances that Russell Gage will be. And that's kind of been my stance, even, going back a few months when we did the breakout article or something. Like, Russell Gage was my pick as far as like the guy who could end up being a wide receiver 2 out of nowhere. So that's, so a lot of the stuff that you guys said is completely valid. And a lot of the stuff is contingent on, I think Eric put it the best. He said it's wobbly. Like, this could break right and could be in really good shape, or it could break wrong very easily. And then the foundation has been compromised, and now the whole house is in jeopardy. So that's, certainly valid. Kind of looking at it from a 50-foot away view.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a fun exercise, right? So to your point about being high on Gage, he's certainly the fourth starter that I would slot in out of this room, right? For that, fifth kind of at-large flex spot, are either of you pulling in a fifth receiver, or do you think that you're more likely to go Henderson and Gaskin out of the running back room?
Yeah, I think for week 1, I'd probably go with the 2 running backs, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And also, rolling the dice that, Fournette stays healthy and Rojo doesn't. Like, that's always a thing too. Like Fournette, his value is essentially in the toilet between Giovanni Bernard and Rojo being in Tampa Bay. But if Rojo gets hurt, then all of a sudden it's a completely different story. And that's a high-octane offense. He's not startable at this point, I think, with the other guys there. But if one of them is out of the picture, then it becomes a different animal. So then I think he becomes flexible at that point. And, bye weeks and things are going to start stacking up. Injuries are going to happen. And injuries can help you or they can hurt you. Like,
sure.
With Cam Akers, all of a sudden it's like you found a starting running back. But that could just as easily go the other way. And, so it's kind of like, that's why they play, what do they say? That's why they play the games, right? Like, you have to let them get out there and play and then see if you're the beneficiary or you're the victim of the injury bug.
So quickly looking at the tight end room, Eric, what do you think about this? We've got the rookie Kyle Pitts, so actually a rookie at every position, so that's a nice balance there. But also a couple of older players, Jimmy Graham and Dalton Schultz. So what are your takeaways from this tight end trio?
Yeah, it's fairly polarized as I look at it, right? Jimmy Graham being re-signed in Chicago, I think, was a bit of a surprise to just about everyone, and certainly to me. So I think that he will still carve out a slightly or somehow more narrow role in the red zone, but there's obviously upside there. Dalton Schultz. I mean, how many mouths to feed can we really rely on Dak Prescott for, especially with Jarwin returning from injury this year? So it's really in my mind one of the premier tight end assets in the dynasty game in Pitts, and then a couple of guys that if you find yourself needing to start them, you're having a bad stretch, right?
It's not good. Yeah.
But usually whenever we've done going for 2, we do personalized podcast leagues, and generally my thing is if the team is not great and they have Pitts, I usually say try and sell Pitts for
Trade
a
Pitts.
haul. and I mean this team, what I think I would want to do is, Pitts and Murray, they're both so popular, and like people will probably pay up for them, even though the positions are start one only. There's no tight end premium. I still think you're probably going to be able to get, if you want to sell both and get two, maybe top 30, top 24 wide receivers, and you're truly making that your strength and saying, I'm going to go 5 wide receivers every week, no struggle. There's going to be a 6th guy on my bench that I even like, and I'm going to be able to play the matchups. That makes sense. I might even go as far and say maybe sell Darrell Henderson. Maybe sell on the hype of people thinking he's going to be a workhorse this year. Get a lesser running back and, again, another wide receiver. Really hammer home that wide receiver depth, because I really do think the way this league is set up, if you can win the wide receiver game, you're going to be able to compete and do really well. So I'd almost look to put everything all in on the wide receiver room. Maybe you sell Henderson and you for a wide receiver, and you sell Pitts for another running back that's even better than Henderson that you wouldn't have been able to attain with Henderson. Maybe that's also how you go about it. But I'm the way I'm seeing it, I think Pitts, Henderson, and Murray are kind of 3 sells to me for this team, and all to bolster either the wide receiver depth or get an elite running back to be that one guy that you're putting in your lineup every week.
All right.
So I don't know if you heard
caveat.
me.
Go ahead, Eric.
I don't know if you heard me hesitate a little bit when I categorized Pitts as premier at the position. In my mind, he's the tight end 1 in the Dynasty game. And the reason being, I believe that he can fill those shoes over the course of time, but his trade value, his worth on the open market is just so incredible that I would love to have him so that I can no longer have him very soon. And
you could almost get any wide receiver you wanted practically.
Let me interject, because I can add a little personal color to this. So in a vacuum, or theoretically, I think that would be very applicable. I can tell you that in this particular league, the offers that I've gotten for Kyle Pitts, the best way I can explain it is you guys remember Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? If the person who offered me the trade was in front of me, I would have gladly reached into their chest, pulled out their heart, and showed it to them, and then used their heart to hit reject on the trade. So, I totally appreciate the idea of Pitts being such a valuable asset in theory, but I can tell you in application, it has been somewhat short of that lofty, that lofty presentation. So that's where we are right now. Things may change if he has a monster game week 1, but that's where we are right now.
You almost have to bank on the opposite, that bank that he engaged, do well. You play them both in your lineup, and maybe instead use Murray and Henderson to bolster the wide receiver room. And instead of having an elite running back, you hope that he becomes an elite tight end. Kind of build it through the wide receiver and tight end room. That's kind of, I suppose, the zag in the league where it seems like everyone's zigging away from Pitts.
Eric, did you like the symbolism with the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom reference?
I did. Just know that every time I reject a trade for the rest of the 2021 season, I'll be picturing myself doing that. I think that there are so many layers and nuances in the Dynasty game. I think these lowball offers might be a bit more perception than reality. Newcomer to the league. The existing members might be trying to gauge.
It was James Robinson and Henry Ruggs for Kyle Pitts straight up. Do you still feel like that was perception?
So I guess where my mind goes is, do you know where Pitts was selected in the rookie draft? Because that would probably be pretty demonstrative of his value to the league.
True. 103.
Yeah. I think they're giving you the runaround a little bit.
Hold firm until you get the good offer. I mean, and again, same thing with Murray, right? Like that, and this is an elite quarterback. You should be able to get a pretty solid starter for them, and same with Pitts, and not get two somewhat solid starters. Like you really want to be going into getting those top 15 assets, top 20 assets at their positions. So
for sure.
The last thing we do is we grade this roster in terms of how much we would want to take it over. So, Eric, I don't know, as the guest, do you want to go first, or do you want me to give the example?
Yeah, I can go first. It's a 1 to 10 scale, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
10
so
being
1 is absolutely not, under no circumstances do I want anything to do with this, and 10 is a hell yes. And you can grade
so
it.
I'm sitting right around 6.5 or a 7. As I'm sure you can glean from the way I responded to the questions. I love to make deals and make things happen with the roster, and I think there are a lot of pieces that you can work with here. It definitely feels like it's well within reason to kind of have that positive 3-year outlook for how the team is put together. With some timely moves and a little bit of wheeling and dealing applied.
Yeah, so I would also have said something similar. Then Doc kind of said that story of, okay, the Pitts offers haven't been great, so it does make you wonder a bit how much true equity does he have with Pitts. So, because this team seems to be the strongest at a position where it doesn't seem as important to be, and kind of lacking the depth that the especially the one position we really want, I'm going to go a little lower than my rank has normally been for these teams we've done here. And I'm going to give it a 5.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's too low. Maybe we'll see a team in a couple of weeks that makes me go that, I was too low on this team. So maybe there's room for it to be a 6 as well. But I think back to last week, we had a couple weeks ago, I had some teams that were ranked 7. I think I'd kind of have them a tier above. So I'm going with a 5. And I don't know, Doc, do you want to preclude yourself? Because I think there's also a bit of information that, part of why you know so much about this league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, you can preclude me for purposes of calculating the score, but I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't give a number.
Fair enough.
So thing is, I love a challenge, right? And I think it's wonderful to get a dynasty team juggernaut that you can just get handed and steamroll the competition. And we've seen those teams on this show, and that's great. But sometimes you have to challenge yourself, both as a fantasy football player, an analyst, an injury analyst, whatever. So full disclosure, this was an orphan team that I adopted. So I give it a 10. And I love the idea, the challenge of taking this bird that's made out of lead and trying to get it to fly out of the nest. Now, maybe it flies, or maybe it falls 50 stories and leaves a giant hole in the concrete. I don't know, but we're going to find out. So it doesn't, I don't need everything laid out for me on a silver platter. I'm willing to get my hands dirty and do some work. And that's where I'm at. So, but I certainly appreciate, the takeaways and the advice, because it's really poignant stuff, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, Doc,
so we'll give.
I'm right there with you. I mean, almost the more disarray the roster is in, the more appealing it is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
there's beauty in the chaos,
a pile of Legos, right? And you get to tinker with it and build something,
right?
So our consensus overall rank gives it a 6. Whether I put it a 5 or 5.5, we'll average it out to a 6 there. So yeah, it's I don't think we've seen a roster that's catastrophic that has nothing.
If Hamid was here, what do you think he would give this team?
Yeah, he's probably gonna make my 5 look like a high mark, to be honest. You thinking 2? I was thinking, yeah, maybe a 3. But yeah, so that's the roster. So yeah, Doc, it seems like you're gonna co-manage this.
Yeah, so I'm gonna team up and see if we can get this lead bird to fly.
But yeah, I think there's a lot to work with, especially at the quarterback position. I think that's kind of the first step is get that value out of the quarterback room and into other position groups, or maybe it's the other thing too is sometimes you don't get the players you want by giving up players. You get picks, and with those picks you buy the players you want too. So that, whatever you think is the best offer you can get for Murray, I think shop aggressively until you get the offer you want, kind of thing. So
we're not there yet, but we're better than we were yesterday. So that's
yeah. So a little bit of cleanup here or there. We appreciate you bringing the roster to us, Doc. Eric, we really appreciate you joining us here, and now you have the chance to kind of plug whatever you want. I already mentioned the Dynasty Pawn Shop, or I guess it'll be the DFS Pawn Shop. But people watching the video could see your Twitter handle there. But for those listening on audio, why don't you let them know where they can find and follow you?
Yeah, so this time of year, more than anything, I want to focus my plug platform to the charity league that I run. Pros with Joe's. So we are in our second year. Actually, a bit of breaking news to the Dynasty Gambit. Fundraising just went live. They're actually opening up, and my phone is pinging as we're here talking now. So the short side of this story is basically you have an opportunity, or everyday players have an opportunity to co-manage a fantasy team in a league full of experts by donating to that Pros charity. So you can check out all that information on Twitter at Pros with Joe's, or you can head to our website, proswithjoes.com. Every single dollar that's raised goes to charity. We raised a little less than $10,000 last year in year one. And it's a ton of fun. There's lifelong friendships coming out of this. Adam Rank went on vacation with his co-manager that he met for the first time a year ago. So it's really cool to see the industry, wrap their arms around this and just the amount of good that we're able to do. So definitely check us out again, proswithjoes.com. You can get registered. You can go right to our donor center. You'll see all of the pros that are participating, the causes that they're supporting. Like you said, Kyle, here in the footer, if anybody wants to read the words that I make, you can follow me directly at Fantasy Nav. I'm a contributor for goingfor2.com, which is where you'll find the DFS pawn shop on Saturday nights this year. Also, Pros with Joe's is now powered by drroto.com. So Doc is one of the pros that I met last year, and I'm doing some contribution, some writing, and some podcast work over there as well. So check out Going for Two, check out drroto.com, and please, if you can, consider making a contribution to the charity. Give a little, give a lot, whatever it might be. It goes such a long way. Every single dollar counts, and you'll feel really good after you do it. I promise.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that and giving people the opportunity to donate to charity and play with some of their favorite analysts. That's awesome that Pros with Joe's allows that.
For sure. Yeah, it's a busy time of year, but it's a labor of love.
Doc, I'd love for you to give any final thoughts, any words, anything you want to share.
Yeah, for sure. Eric, thanks again for coming aboard and joining us here. And the website, Pros versus Joe's, is that versus spelled out, or is it VS, like Pros VS Joe's? Like what's the lineage?
Yeah, we've got a branding crisis that's hung over us for 2 years. It's Pros with Joe's.
Pros with Joe's. Okay, got it.
And it's all spelled out. Pros with Joe's.
Got it. Well, that really sounds amazing. As a matter of, as soon as we get done here, like I'm logging on and joining up. And I encourage everybody else to do the same. It sounds like it's a really great cause, great charity, and great work that you're doing. For myself, if anybody wants to follow my injury analysis or follow me, I'm on Twitter at TFSDoc, here at Going for Two and Going for Two Live every Thursday night on the Dynasty Gambit. Soon enough, we will be switching over to the Monday night show. Kyle, Dan Rosier, and Gladys Louise Tyler we'll all be there together doing the Monday night show. And before draft season is over, with all the injuries that are happening around the league, I do have a book out on injury analysis called Injuries Suck, But Your Fantasy Team Doesn't Have To. There's a link on my Twitter page. It's all about injury analysis. Oh, there it is. All about injury analysis and 100 pages or so to really help you get a leg up on your draft this year, whatever your format, redraft, dynasty, and really get a leg up on your other competitors in your league. And
when someone breaks their leg, you know what to do.
Exactly. E-version, paperback, it's all available on Amazon. And thanks for checking it out. Thanks for listening for everybody. And Kyle, thanks for hosting. Always a pleasure.
Of course. At Senra says
nice Vanna White skills there, Kyle.
Oh,
he missed his true calling.
I'm very wheel of fortunate that that's not the case. But I think the whole world is wheel of fortune to that. But you can find me here if you like what you saw on the Going for Two Live network. I'm at Senra Says on Twitter. I also have another show I do as part of this. As Doc mentioned, I'll be joining the Monday Night Crew. Like we did last year, but also have the press coverage podcast, and our next episode will actually be tomorrow night. So basically just shy of a little more than 24 hours away. I think scheduled right now for 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that'll be on August 20th Friday night. The founder and our big boss here at Going for Two, Jeff Lambert, will be joining me. So if ever you've wanted to know the man behind Going for Two, Jeff Lambert, definitely check out tomorrow night's episode, and Jeff will spill all the details. So the press coverage pod, just get to know all the fantasy analysts, and in this case, all our boss here, Doc. So yeah. I'll make the questions easy enough. He's my boss after all. But no, anyone who's watched the show that knows the format, how people got into fantasy sports and some other fun things, maybe favorite books, for instance. But yeah, so definitely check that out tomorrow night. And on behalf of Eric, again, thank you. We appreciate you joining us as a guest. On behalf of Dr. James Ferretti, the Fantasy Sports Doc, I'm Kyle Senra, and this was